¿Cuándo cree usted que perdimos? El ser humano perdió, y nuestra civilización perdió el camino. ¿Cuándo traicionamos el amor? ¿De dónde viene el origen de estos males, esta idea de medicina, esta idea de sociedad, digamos?
It's a great question. And it's a question that whoever cares for humanity, and I'd like to declare at the front that my revolution is a revolution of care, clearly. One of the first things I started to study in my youth was primates. There are 5 great apes, and only one of them lives alone. The rest of us live in groups. The group comes first. We care first for the group. Intellectually, philosophically, the idea of the individual is very new to human history. It's no more than 200 years old, the idea that we are an individual, that a child should be specially cared for. These are new ideas. That before that, we were conscious of a group, of extended families was the closest to modern times. But for most of Homo sapien history, we lived in what a gorilla or a chimpanzee would be a group. Would never have thought of me. They would thought of a group. And this worked for humans, I think, until agriculture. The owning of land, my land. When the Native American people had Europeans come and say, we own land in Europe, the Indians said, how can you own land? God owns the land. It was inconceivable to the Native American, this idea of ownership of land, my land. And so arrogant, because the land is in charge of the land. Its drought or rain or what happens to the land is millions of years old. Not my land. And so I think the ownership of land led to this idea of arrogance over our environment. And hence, in today's form, we are headed for extinction for our complete disregard for our environment. The human environment, when we start having recorded history in the West, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years old with the Sumerian tablets, that we don't know what really happened from land ownership to this time. So when recorded history comes in, if we look at the Greeks, Herodotus and Thucydides, we see that they record history in terms of power over. Women have shown us, when the feminist movement came, that it was his story, history. And that story is stories of war, of leaders. Then, once the war has been won, it is a story of winners of wars, not losers of wars. And once you have a winner, you distribute the land most to the generals, second to the captains, third to the lieutenants, and the crumbs for the soldiers who actually did the work. And somewhere there, power over became the value system. And that makes sense if we look back at primates. In the gorilla or the chimpanzee, this idea of the silverback and the hierarchy of power. A wonderful Dutch primatologist, Frans de Waals, has written 6 great books on the chimpanzee. One, Chimpanzee Politics. The most interesting one is Peacemaking Among Primates. and saying, yes, chimpanzees fight in a hierarchy, but they always make up within a half an hour. As men lean towards the sword of power. And so we have machismo
Machismo, sí.
being the torch of power, and tenderness being the torch of love. And in power, you must only think of me in order to kill, because you cannot be thinking of us and kill us. So it made sense to follow power by saying me, because the mother says you.
Usted ayer en un encuentro con los jóvenes, jóvenes chilenos muy impresionantes, usted les dijo a ellos, ustedes quizás van a ser la última generación sobre la Tierra, y les dijo que usted había investigado sobre esto. Me gustaría que me explicara ese diagnóstico tan apocalíptico. ¿De dónde tiene sus bases?
I would actually move it away from this idea of apocalyptic, because so often this word is felt to be a philosophical apocalypse. I want to tell you I am reporting medical information. I'm not actually calling it an apocalypse. To give the metaphor in medicine, in the 40s and 50s, doctors found out if you have a strep throat and don't take penicillin, you can get rheumatic heart disease. It was the #1 heart disease in the world at this time from a strep throat. When doctors discovered if I give penicillin, I can prevent the rheumatic heart disease. At first, doctors did not want to do this. They said, how can a little sore throat, I had one last week, how can this cause permanent damage in the heart? But the connection was clear. The doctor's report was then to convince the patient and say, you have a strep throat. You need to take the penicillin. It is in that position that I want to talk about our extinction. Because it is not a philosophical conclusion. It comes from a scientific assessment of many factors. With rheumatic heart disease, we can have one factor, a strep throat. With extinction, we must look at many systems. The most fragile and the one most affected by our arrogance has to do with our environment. There is a huge body of literature that talks about global warming, completely ignored by our president. Because all of the problems causing the extinction are caused by the love of money and power, and always choosing the ignorance of money and power over the intelligence of scientific and social truths.